Greetings sailors, welcome back to World of Warships and one from the archive. This is an NA game and it's a slightly older one as well, but this represents a bit of a fail that turned out to be not so bad of a game, and you can already see there on the loading screen quite what the fail was. I was in a tier 7 ship, Redman 36, was in an Alabama, a tier 8 ship, and yet I hadn't noticed. I had not noticed that I'd picked the wrong ship. I had in fact managed to pick, I had meant to pick the Chapayev, and instead I took the Shchors, and I managed to start the game without noticing my fail. And I don't know how. I just distinctly remember getting up to a little bit after this, and you know, I'm making for the island ahead of me so that I can radar A, because I'm in a Chapayev, right? And somehow I hadn't noticed that the tier says 7, that the ship name says Shchors, and that there's no radar consumable. That it all completely escaped my notice, and it was only around about now-ish, I think maybe not even quite yet, where I in fact went, huh, this isn't a Chapayev at all. So well done, brain. So on the NA server, as you are possibly aware, hello Iowa, I have been grinding down the Soviet cruiser line. I say destroyer because I am now also actually grinding down the Soviet destroyer line. I'm as far as the Gnevny, but no, cruisers is what we're talking about. And I'm actually past the Chapayev now. I'm onto the Dmitry Donskoy. I've gotten as far as unlocking the top hull, but it's quite a long grind to the Moskva, so that one's going to take a little while. I'm not actually sure if I've got any Chapayev replays to show you. It's an okay ship. I had an okay time with it, and having that long-range radar is quite useful, but much like the Shchors, it handles terribly in the water. In fact, I think the Shchors might be the worst of the line, just in terms of its turning radius. Yeah, it isn't quite a battleship, but actually, having said that, I think it is worse than some battleships. I think there might be some that can outmaneuver this thing in terms of its turning radius. So it isn't the best at wiggling out of the way of incoming fire. It doesn't react particularly well. It does, at least, however, have a decent turn of speed. I think it can get to, was it 35 knots? I can't remember offhand. I know it's 36 in the replay, but I'm sure I'm using a Sierra Mike flag. Or maybe not. Maybe the 36 is the default. Maybe I took off all the flags. I tend to do that. I've got far fewer flags on NA, so once I've gone past the ship, I've kept some of them, but I tend to strip off the flags and keep them for the ones I'm actively grinding. So much for the plan of popping a radar and helping out A, because this would have been a really good time to do it. There's so much smoke, and instead I just have to rely on the spotting plane, the poor man's radar, and it's not quite as useful. We can already tell that we're outnumbered here, though. There's 2 battleships, myself, Benson and a Fletcher, and there's at least that many enemy ships, plus more coming over this way, so it's not looking that great. And in fact, we've ended up with a very ugly looking minimap in terms of the team being split east and west. You don't really ever want to get yourselves as a team into this position where half the team is at one cap and the other half of the team is on the other side of the map at a completely different cap, because you're just going to end up with one of those two sides being weaker and probably getting crushed by the enemy. And at that point you are starting to be severely down on numbers, and you don't even have map control anymore. So that's a very bad situation to get yourself into. It's very hard to come back from that, and that's pretty much what it looks like is happening here. We've already, well, we are possibly going to lose one or more of those destroyers. The Iowa and the Bismarck are getting severely beat up. And I'm in a squashy tier 7 cruiser. I mean, it's not quite as squashy as the Pensacola, but it's still quite squashy. So the Fletcher's gone, the Benson's now alone, and the enemy team do have radar ships there, and multiple cruisers supporting that Kagero. And I'm trying to do my best, and I'm doing, you know, some damage. I'm getting some hits in here, but it's not going to be quite enough to kill this this Kagero quickly. And in fact, he's able to stop and smoke, and on a tiny amount of health, he's going to get away with it, unfortunately. So there goes the Benson. And again, radar would have been really useful right now, but never mind. So that leaves me alone with, well, now just the Iowa, because the Bismarck's died, and the Iowa's not looking too healthy either. So all of a sudden, coming over here has not seemed like a smart plan. Redman actually went in the opposite direction. He's ended up with the group of ships over by sea, which now represents the majority of the remainder of the team. We've lost 4 ships, they've lost 2, and I'm not in a good position, so I'm now just having to run the heck away and rely on this speed. So, a nice broadside Baltimore. We'll see if we can do some good work with the AP, and this is exactly why you should be varying your ammo usage. You know, the temptation with these is, especially once you've got an IFHE captain, which I'm not sure I had on the Shchors. I bumped up my, I've got like an 18-point captain on the Soviet cruiser line now. Yeah, I would have put in like a 3-point captain or something like this, so it wouldn't even have been a good captain. But yeah, the temptation is to just, you know, go IFHE all the way, only ever fire HE and be done with it. But no, there are plenty of situations where the 6-inch AP shells are very, very useful. And even though I didn't actually get any citadels against the Baltimore, I still did a reasonable amount of damage. And if we can take him down, in fact, that makes our Kagero's position that much more secure, and hopefully we can take control of the cap. So there's a very good chance I'm going to die. I mean, I've got multiple enemies focusing me right now, because I'm a lone cruiser, and I'm in a pretty bad spot. I'm basically fairly out in the open, and I'm trying to get towards some cover, but yeah, it's not really working out so well so far. And, well, not having a good captain, I don't think I'd have had concealment expert on this, so I maybe could have tried to get a bit more north, but I also didn't want to just get chased away from the action and end up being completely out of it while the rest of my team was struggling. But I've lost, at this point, a fairly significant amount of health, so there's only so much more attention I can take. So there's only one person targeting me right now. I think most of them switch their attention to possibly the Kagero or our teammates that are now trying to push out into B. But the one that was focusing me there, in fact now it's back up to 2, was a battleship. So that's another almost quarter of my health gone. And I don't think I got citadeled at any point in this. I think I just took lots of penetration damage. Whereas in a Pensacola I possibly would have been citadeled from some of the angles I was being shot from. So yeah, this thing isn't quite as squashing, but if you're broadside, it's not good. Now, I could not resist the temptation to open fire at this Kiev, which was probably a bad plan because I'm trying to get towards the relative safety of the sea cap. There are at least some islands I can use there as cover, and some are in fact low enough to fire over. You don't get quite as many islands you can use in the Soviet 6-inch cruisers as you do with the Americans, because they don't have the gun arcs, but of course the upside of that is that the trajectories being flatter means that the shells get there sooner. You know, they are faster shells, quite significantly faster in some cases. So you know, swings and roundabouts. Sometimes you want one characteristic over the other, but generally speaking, I think I prefer the Soviet 6-inch guns to, say, the Cleveland's 6-inch guns. So I've done a little bit of wiggling, and it's been enough to throw off the enemy aim. So we're safely into the cap now, and if I can get some solid cover, that would be even better, because the enemy team is now counter-pushing, basically. They're trying to block us from capping B. And they are ahead on points, and they are ahead on ships. So this is looking a little bit dicey, but it's looking doable. They don't have an overwhelming advantage. This isn't the kind of situation where the team gets split up and you lose a huge swathe of your team and then the enemy team just steamrolls. No, we were doing sufficient damage to the enemy team to make this a fighting proposition, even if we are, at the moment, the underdogs. And everybody wants to root for the underdogs, right? So incoming fire from this Amagi, but he's firing HE for some reason, and it is obviously going to do some damage. It might even set a fire, which it does, but it's not going to do as much as AP could have. So that wasn't so bad, all things considered. So I'm just kiting away a little bit at the moment. I possibly should have been more actively trying to find island cover I think I was a bit too caught up in must shoot the enemies, must shoot red team, and if I'd positioned myself better before I started firing, things would have been considerably less awkward, but oh well, we're here now. So we lost the Scharnhorst that pushed out. Redman's actually pushed around south, and along with the Baltimore, they're actually putting in some flank fire, which is not a terrible idea right now, because it means, I mean, we have split up the team, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but it means they're having to deal with fire from multiple directions. And as Redman's the remaining battleship, if he can get some broadside shots, then you know, he could do some serious damage, or else he forces them to turn broadside to us cruisers, which is less bad for the enemy battleships, you know, the Amagi in this case, but it's still a much easier target to hit a broadside battleship and potentially set some fires. So damage wise, I haven't done a huge amount so far. I mean, I've only set 3 fires, so it's not been a great game for ticking fire damage. And with cruisers, I mean, you see what health I'm down to. With cruisers, they are a threat to battleships over time, and you know, if you're not putting torpedoes into the equation potentially, whereas battleships can knock down a cruiser very, very quickly, which is, it's not the best game design. I think that's maybe one of those areas where wargaming does need to redress things a little bit. I think it's a bit too one-sided at the moment in terms of that perceived imbalance. You know, it's very, very easy to get completely obliterated in a cruiser, whereas to do the opposite thing involves getting usually very, very close if you have torpedoes, and hoping that they aren't able to dodge out the way, or that you don't just get blown to pieces trying to do it. Of course, the idea is that destroyers would be performing that role, but torpedo destroyers are kind of on the wane. I mean, there's the Japanese, which have very easily spottable torpedoes. If you are aware there's a Japanese destroyer around, it's not that hard to dodge out the way. And then there's the Germans that can stealth drop as well, but they seem to be a little bit less effective at it. You don't see that many German destroyers. So more AP, and yeah. Oh well, goodbye. What was that? New Orleans. So yeah, definitely don't discount the AP. It's pretty good stuff. So we've brought this back basically between Redman, you know, between the last couple of ships, between Redman, myself, the Fiji and the Kagero. We took down their bigger ships, and all that's left now is the small fry. So I'm closest to this Kiev, and I should be able to take him out. I mean, I'm low health, but he's comparatively much lower health. And then there's a Mars down towards the south. So I'm definitely going to get to tangle with the Kiev, and there he is. HE all the way for this particular task, and takes him out one salvo. Very nice. And so that just leaves the Mars, but I'm unlikely to get a shot off before the game ends. You never know, though. It might happen. So there he is. Redman's capping just for the XP, I think. And the Fiji and the Kagero, well, it'll be one of those two that takes him out. So we'll see who gets it. And well, it cuts off just before the end, but I think it was the Kagero. Not sure. It might have been the Fiji, actually. It's kind of annoying with replays where I have to stop them recording just before the end. You sometimes miss that final moment or two, but yeah, overall that was, despite me somehow not realizing that this was a Shchors and not a Chipaev, it turned out to be a decent game, and it was just kind of lucky it wasn't a tier 10 game. I suppose we did get a break in that regard. 70k damage, not too bad. It's not really anything special. The Fiji did very well, as you could see there as well. So they were obviously able to use smoke and islands appropriately and rack up a fair bit of damage. And all in all, you know, that was a very close game. And although the team made that often fatal decision to split into two groups on opposite sides of the map, it worked out. It still worked itself into a situation where it wasn't a decisive disadvantage. It was definitely a disadvantage, but the enemy team wasn't really able to capitalize on it. I think the remaining ships were able to do sufficient damage and hold their own that we did eventually bring it back, but it was still a pretty close game, and you know, I felt like I was able to contribute to that, and of course Redman was as well. So yeah, that was an okay match, and shows some of what the Shchors is good at running away in straight lines and firing lots of HE at things quite rapidly, which is just the flavour of quite a lot of the Soviet cruisers, I suppose. But yeah, all in all, it wasn't a bad game, and I was reasonably pleased with that result. So hopefully you found this video interesting, and if you did, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.